Good morning, and welcome to the weekend worship service of the First Unitarian Church of Salt Lake City. I hope that each one of you has had a lovely holiday weekend, got something really yummy to eat and some rest, and ready to start the holiday season together. I'm overjoyed to see each one of you. Thank you for being here today. If you're visiting with us, we are especially glad to have you. I invite you, if you're here with us in person after worship, please stop by the welcome table just outside this door in our fellowship hall. Or if you're joining us online, we'd love for you to visit our website, slcuu.org, or our social media channels to learn more about our congregation and how you can be a part of what we're doing here. I have just a few announcements as we begin. First, many of you have asked about how we're going to help out our friends over in West Valley City at San Esteban, and we are going to be helping them out this year, so thanks for asking. This year, the community has asked for our financial support, and so to make giving as easy as possible, we have several ways for you to contribute. First, you can use the donation page on our website. Just click Donate on the top right, and then scroll down to the place that says Other. Write San Esteban on the line and then make your donation. You can also use our Givelify app and kind of do the same thing. I think there's a San Esteban envelope, but you can also use the other option. Or you can just send a check if this is all too complicated. Just send us a check and put the word San Esteban on the memo line. We're asking for you to get your donations in by December 17th so that we can deliver them over there. And thank you for your generosity. Second, please mark your calendars for December 12th. We will be having a tree trimming party here after worship to get ready for the holiday season. You can help us decorate our Christmas tree. We'll have ornaments for you to create and greens to hang. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we'd love for all of you to be involved. And finally, don't forget, this Wednesday night is team meeting night. 7 o'clock on Zoom. We'll be meeting on the same meeting link that you're joining us for worship right now, same link. We'll have the same 4 teams that we had at the first team meeting night, which was last month: social justice, building and grounds, caring team, and hospitality. Now, hospitality is an umbrella that encompasses the greeter team, the welcome table, coffee service, which will be back someday, and our new member orientation. So if you're part of any of those efforts, we would love for you to come. Now, with all that out of the way, let us begin our worship service by lighting the chalice. Today with these words by the Reverend Kimberly Quinn Johnson. We are the ones we have been waiting for. We are not perfect, but we are perfectly fitted for this day. We are not without fault, but we can be honest to face our past as we chart a new future. We are the ones we have been waiting for. May we be bold and courageous to chart that new future. May we have faith in a future that is not known. We are the ones we have been waiting for. This time I'd like to invite forward a member of our congregation and a member of our Board of Trustees, Derek Gersdorf, to tell you about why he gives.
Good morning. My name is Derek Gersdorf, and I'm a new Board of Trustees member at the First Unitarian Church of Salt Lake City. I'm looking forward to meeting everybody, and today I'm continuing the series on why I give my time, money, and talents to this church. Over 15 years ago, I was happily unchurched and untithed, having left the LDS Church after a mission and BYU graduation. For a time, Albert Camus' The Myth of Sisyphus became my new scripture, less as a guide than as a way to live with the absurdity of going from absolute certainty almost about everything to sensing the impossible task of reading and experiencing all the other ideas, philosophies, religions, and ways of being as a finite human being in an infinite world. I had a friend who wanted to visit as many churches as he could in the valley to obtain more than just a book knowledge of the various religions. I was the only one he knew willing to undertake that odyssey. We went to a different church every Sunday, and sometimes on Saturdays for over a year. Everything from Catholic to Greek Orthodox, many mainstream Protestant churches, to Pentecostal, Scientology, the Center of Inner Light, to the Gnostic Church, to the Zen Center, and everything in between. One Sunday morning, we attended a service here at the First Unitarian Church. We sat in the balcony at the back to take it all in. The sermon that fateful day was titled Postmodernism and Religion. It was filled with poetry, stories, some history, and even quotes from Hegel or Heidegger. And I was hooked. This is church, I asked myself. I had finally found a home. Above all, I was delighted to find a church that gave you more questions than answers, to challenge me to become both more introspective and channel that energy into concrete action to make this world a better place. Reverends Ian and Monica continue this First Unitarian Church tradition of excellent sermons. And our Sunday services could not be the same without David, and our wonderful music program. David does such a great job of weaving the musical themes with the spoken word. And yes, someday our choir will be back. I began to attend one church for the first time in years. After each sermon, I wandered into Elliott Hall, got some coffee, and waited for someone to talk to. We will have coffee hour someday again. I quickly realized that I need to be more proactive to find friends and community at this church. This began my love affair with the small group ministry program that I've been involved in ever since. 8 to 14 members meet once a month to discuss a spiritual topic and socialize. Many of the closest friends I've met is through small group ministry. The discussion facilitator creates an atmosphere of trust, love, compassion, and understanding. Each group is different, and you can change groups every year if you wish to meet more members. In some groups, a spiritual, even sacred space is formed during these discussions, and you will find yourself greatly anticipating these gatherings with friends. In other groups, it seems that we laugh just as much as we dialogue. I lead a second Tuesday evening of the month group, and we're looking for a few more female voices if you're interested. I then brought my 2 girls every other Sunday, as they were raised in 2 churches, to the first church, and they thoroughly enjoyed and learned from the Coming of Age program, Our Whole Lives, which is comprehensive sexuality, the high school programs, and bridging to the young adult group at graduation. When you belong to an organization that transforms lives, especially our youth and children, like the First Unitarian Church, you will want to devote your time and, yes, money to support this church. So I threw myself into religious education program, teaching up through the grades as my girls grew, starting with teaching the 5th, 6th grade class in the lower school for 4 years, then junior high for 4 years, where we alternate between world religions, including field trips, which are a ton of fun, and the Coming of Age curriculum, pairing each youth with a mentor and help them develop their own ideas about deity, the afterlife, and what an ethical life looks like. After a whole year of working through these hard questions that we adults rarely do, they each give a short sermon here to expound their thoughts to the larger congregation. Do not miss this Sunday service. You will be astounded by our youth's growth, wisdom, and insight. I then taught the First Unitarian Church high school class for 3 years. The first year, we closely examined the 7 Unitarian Universalist principles and weaved into them an introduction to philosophy. The very first class, I hung a picture of Donald Trump on the wall next to the first Unitarian Universalist principle, which reads, "The inherent worth and dignity." We believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person. I asked, do you really believe this principle? The subsequent discussion was rich, nuanced, and powerful. If there's enough interest, I would love to lead an adult religious education class on the same topics. I could deliver a whole sermon on how much good you can do in Salt Lake City by giving your time, talents, and money to the First Unitarian Church. Instead, I just want you to get a vision or a glimpse of the good our church does in our community. To name a few, our environmental ministry work, especially relevant, look at the air. Our work to support refugees, so successful that another church sent their refugee expert to learn from us. Our work raising our children and youth, to take from all the best of every tradition to fashion their lives, into the best of humanity. Our ministers, music and lay ministry, creatively challenge us to improve our own lives and those around us. Our work in small group ministry to foster friendship and deep spiritual or ethical conversations. This glimpse or vision of what our church offers us and our larger community is why I serve and commit time to this cherished community.
Today is the first Sunday of Advent, a time of expectant watching and waiting in the Christian tradition when the faithful slow down, embrace darkness and simplicity, lighting candles for the virtues of hope, joy, love, and peace. Tonight is the first night of Hanukkah, a time for rejoicing for miracles in the Jewish tradition, when the faithful rededicate themselves to what's most important and light single candles for the virtues of being cared for and having enough. We begin this holiday season still sort of not knowing what time it is. For many of us, it still feels like 2020 or even 2019, when actually 2021 is almost behind us. The pandemic has riven our connection with seasonal rhythms, and holidays are one important way to reestablish that connection, but only if we are moving slowly enough to feel it. If we rush through, pack in too many activities, we'll miss the opportunity to reset these rhythms. So I invite you now to join me in a spirit of prayer or meditation to set an intention for this holiday. Let's settle down into ourselves, into our hearts, and ask ourselves what we really want. Spirit of the season, we order our days with the rhythms of ritual and tradition that, at their best, reflect the rhythms of nature in its cycles and connect us to each other and to you. Help us to pursue only what is restorative and nourishing in this season. We embrace hope, the trust that a better world is not only possible, but already on its way. We embrace love, actions that indicate our commitment to the inherent worth of every person. We embrace joy, the unshakable feeling that we belong. We embrace peace, the gift of being present to what is, no matter what it is. We embrace abundance, the certainty that we already have enough of what we really need, that we are cared for and held in love immeasurable. We rededicate ourselves to our highest purpose by naming it, writing it on our hearts in bold letters, and committing to the actions which make that purpose real. The simplest joys are the ones that last. The things that matter are not on sale, and they're not even for sale. Help us to embrace these things. Amen. Friends, thank you once again for being here today. It is a real joy to see all of you here. At this time, our offering will gratefully be received. Our congregation depends entirely on the contributions of its members and friends. So please give generously. You can use the QR code in the seat in front of you, or we will be accepting cash or checks donations. If the basket comes by you, just raise your hand and let Bob know that you'd like to put something in the basket. At this time, you can also turn to your neighbor. Wish them a happy Sunday. This week, I read a quote by the artist Ólafur Eliasson about the power of art to change the world. One of the great challenges today is that we often feel untouched by the problems of others and by global issues like climate change, even when we could easily do something to help. We do not feel strongly enough that we are part of a global community, part of a larger we. Giving people access to data most often leaves them feeling overwhelmed and disconnected, not empowered and poised for action. This is where art can make a difference. Art cannot show people what to do, but it can make the world felt. And this felt feeling may spur thinking, engagement, and even action. Take a moment to think about the artists who have made an impact on your life. It's enough to look at an object of beauty, a painting of bold colors and textures, or a sculpture of flawless proportions that inspires you to find beauty in your own life. But it's even more inspiring to view art that draws people's attention toward some evil or injustice in the world, convicting their hearts, galvanizing them for change. The artist Ai Weiwei is such an artist, known internationally as a dissident whose art, work, and life speak courageously against the control and power of the Chinese Communist government. His art often uses what seem to be everyday objects, but on closer inspection are objects of incomparable value that point to the history and culture of the Chinese people. For example, sunflower seeds is an enormous field of over 100 million sunflower seeds, but these are no ordinary seeds. Each one was handmade of Chinese porcelain and hand-painted by one of over 1,600 artists in the same town that produced the Chinese imperial porcelain for over 1,000 years, giving viewers in the West a new perspective on the concept of made-in-China mass production. Another work, Remembering, is a mural installation commemorating the Sichuan earthquake of 2008, in which thousands of school children were killed when their shoddily constructed school buildings collapsed. In a nation still living under a one-child policy, the loss was incalculable. However, the Chinese government's official toll undercounted the true loss by as much as half. I created the mural out of 9,000 children's backpacks, arranged to spell in Chinese characters The sentence, "For 7 years she lived happily on the earth," the words of a mother who lost her child in the quake. Ai Weiwei has just released a memoir called 1,000 Years of Joys and Sorrows, his memories of growing up in political exile with his father, who was singled out by the Chinese Communist Party for his writings which were interpreted as subversive. Ai Qing is known as one of the greatest Chinese poets of the 20th century, yet his longing for freedom of expression and his love for life repeatedly earned him punishment from the rising political powers of the Maoist government. Ai recalls life in re-education camps, a bleak childhood of living in underground bunker-style quarters where his father was forced to clean latrines and starvation was a constant threat. The work for which Ai is probably best known is his 1995 work, Dropping a Han Dynasty Urn, which is how I became acquainted with his work. 3 photographs document Ai holding a 2,000-year-old urn, then dropping it, the urn hanging for a moment in midair, and then the shattered pieces at his feet. He actually had to drop 2 urns, since the photographer was not able to capture the shattering urn on the first attempt. Now, many were outraged at what seemed like the willful destruction of a priceless antiquity. And looking at the images, you can feel a little sick looking at the shards of priceless porcelain lying on the ground. But others understood. This piece was about Ai's father and his country. The destruction of thousands of years of culture by Chairman Mao and the Cultural Revolution of the 60s and 70s. When asked about his motivation for smashing these urns, I told journalists that Chairman Mao always said that in order to create something new, the old had to be destroyed. But what is lost when we destroy our links to the past? What is lost inside us as individuals, and what is lost in our collective understanding of ourselves? Ai's memoir of his father's life in exile is a love letter to his own son, a refusal to give up the memories of what happened, an assertion that no healing ever comes from covering up painful memories. Ai's message to his son and to us is that in order to keep from repeating cycles of injustice and oppression, we must make meaning of suffering. We have to say out loud what happened and how it changed us if we want to keep it from happening again. Like Ai Weiwei, we too are facing a time of enormous transition in our national and political life, a time when we are terrified as we watch our most cherished values being eroded or even smashed before our eyes, a time when our integrity is being tested. The greater our privileges, the more tempting it will be to close our eyes to the suffering in our world. Indeed, political power, no matter what economic system holds it, whether communist or capitalist, power wants us to invest in our privileges so that we can be insulated from suffering. But no one gets through this life without suffering. You know they based a whole world religion on this, right? It's the first noble truth of Buddhism. Suffering is endemic in life. We suffer in our bodies through disease, disability, and death. We suffer in our minds through trauma, but also through simple misunderstandings of interconnection and by clinging to illusions and expectations. What Ai points us toward in his art is that we also suffer collectively, nationally, culturally. When other people's children are separated from their parents and locked in cages, we suffer. When 40% of Americans cannot find $400 for an emergency, we suffer. When 100,000 people die of overdoses in a single year, we suffer. When island nations disappear under rising oceans because of the fossil fuel use of nations like ours, we suffer. The question is, can we perceive how we suffer? Or are we too insulated by privilege and comfort to notice? The great religious writer and Catholic priest Henry Nouwen retells an old story in his book, The Wounded Healer, and it goes like this. One day, a young fugitive, trying to hide himself from the enemy, entered a small village. The people were kind to him and offered him a place to stay. But when the soldiers who sought the fugitive asked where he was hiding, everyone became very fearful. The soldiers threatened to burn the village and kill everyone in it unless the young man were handed over to him by dawn. The people went to the minister and asked him what to do. The minister, torn between handing over the boy to the enemy or having his people killed, withdrew to his room and read his Bible, hoping to find an answer before dawn. After many hours, in the early morning, his eyes fell on these words: "It is better that one man dies than that the whole people be lost." Then the minister closed the Bible, called the soldiers, and told them where the boy was hiding. And after the soldiers led the boy away to be killed, there was a feast in the village because the minister had saved the lives of the people. But the minister did not celebrate. Overcome with a deep sadness, he remained in his room. That night, an angel came to him and asked, "What have you done?" He said, "I handed the fugitive over to the enemy." Then the angel said, "But don't you know that you have handed over the Messiah?" "How could I know?" the minister replied anxiously. Then the angel said, "If, instead of reading your Bible, you had visited this young man just once and looked into his eyes, you would have known." Those of us who are insulated from the suffering of the world by privilege might easily identify with the minister in this story. How much likelier are we to read a book about poverty or immigration than to get to know real poor people or immigrants in person? I don't blame you if your reactions to the story are ouch and yes, they were for me. And yet, think for a moment of being the fugitive, trying to hide himself from the enemy, relying on the kindness of strangers for safety. You have also been this person. Someone in this room has been poor, maybe still is, perhaps even hiding it well. Someone in this room has struggled with addiction or mental illness, or someone dear to you has. Someone here survived an abusive childhood or an abusive partnership. Someone here is struggling with disease or disability, living with chronic pain, learning to live in a body that can't do what it once did, or a body that seems to rebel. Someone here has lost their sense of purpose, is unsure what the world needs from them now, has lost their sense of hope. All of us are suffering. All of us are the fugitive, trying to hide from the enemy, and all of us are hoping that an advocate will show up to look in our eyes and see who we really are. And all of us are the minister, trying to escape from taking responsibility for our own suffering and that of others. Nouwen invites us to recognize two human responses to suffering, the mystic and the revolutionary. As mystics, we respond to the suffering by going inward, exploring our own suffering, perhaps at the expense of recognizing the suffering of others. This is the way of the minister in our story. When faced with suffering, he retreats to his room to pray. As revolutionaries, we throw ourselves into the struggle against injustice, the way of the fugitive. But the danger there is that if we resist exploring our own suffering, we risk further endangering those around us. But when the mystic and the revolutionary meet, they become the wounded healer, the one whose experience of suffering becomes the energy used to make a difference in the world. Nouwen says, we are called to recognize the sufferings of our time in our own hearts and make that recognition the starting point of our service. Whether we try to enter into a dislocated world, relate to a convulsive generation, or speak to a dying person, our service will not be perceived as authentic unless it comes from a heart wounded by the suffering about which we speak. The mystic and the revolutionary are not opposites, but two sides of the same human mode of experiential transcendence. Conversion is the individual equivalent of revolution. Therefore, every real revolutionary is challenged to be a mystic at heart, and the one who walks the mystical way is called to unmask the illusory quality of human society. Mysticism and revolution are two aspects of the same attempt to bring about radical change. No mystic can prevent themselves from becoming a social critic, since in self-reflection, they will discover the roots of a sick society. Similarly, no revolutionary can avoid facing his human condition, since in the midst of their struggle for a new world, they will find that they are also fighting their own reactionary fears and false ambitions. Unitarian Universalists are a people on fire for social justice. Whether we have an experience of God or not, we aren't waiting for God to solve our problems. We want to take responsibility ourselves for healing the world. But we can't do effective social justice work if we don't also attend to our own healing, the healing of the wounds in our own lives and the healing of others in our community. We have to acknowledge that we too are vulnerable and be willing to risk being vulnerable with others. Your story of healing from illness, from bereavement, from trauma and loss, from the wounds of systemic injustice, your stories have the power to facilitate healing for other people here in our church and in your circles of influence. Your life is a work of art that speaks volumes about the potential for change in the world, and your story can provide hope to others who are struggling. My challenge to you is to share your ongoing work of art with us and let yourselves be moved by the healing of others. Be a mystic. Be a revolutionary. Change the world. May it be so.
If I can stop one heart from breaking, I shall not live in vain. I shall not live in
Thank you, David. Beautiful music today. Thank you to our cantors, Lissa Lander, Nikki Blackburn Fuller, very much appreciated. Thank you to our Sunday morning team, Bob Johnson, Skip Reinerson, Carol Romagosa is waiting for our visitors at the welcome table just outside this door. If you're not visiting, or if you are visiting and then you go there, then go outside where we'll meet together, have conversation. We do ask that people not congregate in Elliott Hall. Let's extend special caution and love to one another as we protect each other. Let us close our service today by extinguishing our chalice with these words by Henry Nouwen. Be surprised by joy. Be surprised by the little flower that shows its beauty in the midst of the barren desert. And be surprised by the immense healing power that keeps bursting forth like springs of fresh water from the depth of our pain.